Hey everybody, it's Brian Asbury, and I just wanted to welcome you to today's episode. If you could, like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and let's continue to grow the developmentally speaking brand.
Today, my guest is former WWE developmental talent. You may remember him as Asher Knight, Rudy Parker. Adam, how are you, sir?
Oh, that name. It's still like, ah, never been a fan of the Rudy Parker, but I made it work. Um, Dude, I'm doing very well. Hanging in there, living life. Uh, how are you?
I just bought a house, so I'm packing up and realizing I have way too much stuff. And
Dude,
with
well,
that,
that's it. You never have enough boxes. Like you feel like you're packing things, and it just moving sucks, but
some
also exciting. So congrats on the
thank
house, man.
thank you. I'm ready for this change and to have something, for me and my kids. So
Yeah.
it's nice. So let me ask you a question you may have been asked a dozen times. What made you want to get into professional wrestling?
So professional wrestling for me, man, it's like that first love, right? So growing up, I have an older brother, and of course, like he and my dad always were like super close. I was always like on the outside looking in, like I was always kind of like closer to my mom. Um, but I always wanted to like spend time with my dad and my brother, and they would always watch wrestling. And so I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and then we were sitting in our downstairs basement, and my dad put on wrestling. And anytime it would be like it'd be like Andre versus whomever, and my dad would always be like, "It's Andre versus Dipstick" or something really funny. But we were watching it, and it was the first match I ever saw, and it was the cage match where Jimmy Superfly Snuka like crawls up, he climbs up the cage, licks it, and then like flies up, and I saw that, and from that moment, man, I was hooked. I loved it. I absolutely like to me wrestling has always sort of been the embodiment from it as living, breathing, real life superheroes
Hmm.
and like supervillains. And I was hooked. I loved it. I watched it all the time. Go through middle school, through high school, like through the Attitude Era. That was wild. Um, I wanted to get into it, and when I was 16, I was a lifeguard at a local pool in Louisville, Kentucky, and one of the managers at the pool worked in developmental with OVW, and he was tag team champion at the time. Um, and I was just like, oh my god, I was 60. I was like, show me all this stuff. He puts me in a legit sleeper hold. I pass out. I wake up on the grass, and that was like my first introducing to real wrestling. And I went home and I told my parents, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to get in here. I want to learn and I want to absorb all of this. I want And my mom at 16, she told me, she said, you will absolutely not be doing that. As long as you are under this roof, you will value your education and you will go to college. And then when you graduate college and you have your home, you can do you can make your rules. And I was like, all right. So fast forward, I am now 24, 25. I graduated college. I have my home. I have my, I'm working at a state hospital, and I was just like, I want to get into this as a hobby. And I still lived in Louisville, so OVW was just right down the street.
Hmm.
And I went in. I spoke to Bill. Bill was kind of like one of the first guys that like he was a referee with OVW. One of the first guys that kind of got me into the business and talking to me about it. I joined their beginners class with Nick Dinsmore, and I had seen that you'd interviewed Nick. I love Nick. Um, Rudy Parker, like my character with WWE, was like I wanted to pay an homage to Nick
Hmm.
with Eugene, and like that's how much I valued and respected him as a performer and professional. Um, so when I started the beginners class, it was wild. I started like 3 weeks into it. It was like a 6 or 8 week course. I started late. I had no idea. I'd never stepped in a ring, never run the ropes, never took a bump. Other than like like brothers in a basement, like
Hmm.
where I'm wrestling with my brother. Like, but I got in and I run the ropes and I'm taking, back bump, front bump, hit the buckles. And Nick he comes up to me. He's just like, we got like a beginner's show in like 3 weeks. I think you and I we could put on like a main event type match. And I was like, beginner.
Mhm.
First show they're gonna put me in a main event with Nick, and I was like, Nick, I don't know what I'm doing. And he's like, just trust me, I got it. So I'm watching everybody kind of walk through like when you kind of get so weird, like, because I know that it's like everybody knows.
Mhm.
But it's like when you're a beginner, like you can talk through it, and like they're gonna shoot up. So everybody's going step by step through it, and I'm just kind of sitting here and I'm looking at Nick, and I was like, "Hey, when do you want to kind of go over or do anything?" And he's like, I don't know. We'll just figure it out." So it comes the night of the show. I'm shitting myself because I'm like so nervous. There's the Davis Arena, Danny Davis. I love also like the super cool guy. Um, he really helped me a lot and helped me get my name out there to WWE. We have this show. It's sold out. There's probably 300 people in the Davis Arena, sold out. It's just and I'm in my first match, less than a month of experience, and Nick is gonna carry that. And I was like, Nick, the show's starting. Like, I have no idea what we're doing, and he's just like, I'll just talk to you in the ring. And that was my first experience of professional wrestling with like an arena with a match. It was wild. Um, a couple of months after that, Elijah Burke, who I'd also seen, the Pope. I love him. Great family friend. Been over to my house countless times. Um, so he came in, and by this point, I think I had 3 months, 3.5 months of experience.
Mhm.
And he comes to me, he's like, "You need to get in front of somebody with WWE." And I was like, "Dude, I have no. How would I even go about that? Like, I have no like who,
Mhm.
how?" And he's like, "They have a tryout." And I said, "Well, am I even good enough to make a try? Like, I barely have equipment and gear. Like, I have 3 or 4 months of experience." And he's like, "Trust me." So but they had a tryout coming up in, I think, like a couple of months after that. So at that point, I had 6 months of experience.
Mhm.
I go to this tryout. I think they had 80 people total. I think they had about 15 girls and about 65 guys. And there are people there that had like 10, 12 years of experience. There's, some of these dudes, like, they're just completely jacked. Like, I,
Mhm.
I work out. I don't look like these guys. And I just remember thinking that like I was gonna do all the little things. Like if I'm in a tag match, I'm working the apron and working the rope. I'm reaching
Mhm.
for my partner, doing all these things, like the little things that I think that a lot of people look over. And Steve Kern, Dr. Tom, Norman Smiley, Dusty Rhodes, those were the coaches down in like FCW.
Mhm.
And when when I met with them, Dr. Tom's first question to me is like, "Why do you want to do this? Like, of all things that you could do, why do you want to do this?" And I just kind of thought about it. I was like, I was born to do this. Like, this is what I want to do. I've had this was my goal as a child, that I wanted to get in the ring and I wanted to do this. So um, I go through the tryout. I finished top five in all of this, right?
Mhm.
Uh, they marked out who, like, they gave out 3 contracts. They gave one contract to one of the top women, and they gave 2 contracts to the 2 top men. And they said that for others who finished within like on their grading scale of what would be like top five, top 10, to sort of keep your phone handy because you could be called up for extra talent.
Mhm.
So I feel kind of encouraged. Steve Kern, and this is where I learned that wrestling is all about like ribbing and practical jokes. I had no clue. So I learned the hard way. And this is one of the like this was an amazing rib that Steve Kern did. Pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "You have a lot of raw potential. He's like, you have the aptitude, you have the brain for this. Like, you can see it, hear it, and you can pick it up. That's great. He's like, problem is, you're super green, and you don't stand out at all. And I was like, oh, gee, tell me how you really feel. And he's like, just do something, change it up. He's like, what if you just cut your hair into like a mohawk or dyed it, a different color? And I was like, all right. I mean, I guess that's something that could help me stand out. No idea. So I get a call from Ty Bailey and um, Johnny Ace, and they call me up and they're like, "Hey, there's a show in Ohio for Monday Night Raw. We want you to come to the show." Now I'm like super pumped. I'm feeling like this is like a dream come true. I show up in Ohio. My wife at that time parked. She got a ticket. She's seeing the show. It's sold out arena. It was the show when Bret Hart first came back in
Okay.
like 2010,
Mm-hmm.
and we're backstage, and I'm getting in the ring. What like uh, Gabby Tough, like Tyler Rex,
Mm-hmm.
formerly known as Tyler Rex. They were in the ring, and I was they were just like, "Hey, who wants to practice taking a burning hammer?" And I was like, and I was just sliding in, and like anything that I could do just to kind of be seen, stand out. And I had shaved my head into this mohawk and dyed it bleach blonde white with blue tips. I was doing what Steve Kern had said. Like he was like, do something to stand out. I did. So it's about 30 minutes before call time. All of a sudden, Ty Bailey comes to me. He's like, "Hey, I don't know where this came from, but somebody saw you in your hair, and they were just like, he has to go. You can't be here." And I was like, "Can't be like Ty? Where am I supposed to go?" He's like, "I don't know, but you can't stay here." And I was like, Ty, dude, like my wife dropped me off. She had gotten a ticket. Like, if I call her phone, no one's gonna be able to hear her phone because of the audience and the crowd. Like, where am I supposed to go? He's like, I don't know. He's like, but you can't go to catering. You can't hang out in the locker room. You can't be here. And so I was just like, what's the issue? And he's like, somebody just doesn't like your hair. And I was like, dude, I'll shave it. It ain't a thing. Like, it'll grow back. I'll just shave my head. So he was like, well, hang on to that thought. And so immediately I go to one of the other extra talents, which Daniel Bryan was
Mm-hmm.
there. And so like I was, asking him if he had like a pair of clippers. He did not. One of the other extra talents did. And so like I'm in the bathroom and I'm just like going over my head, like with just shaving it off. And Ty comes in. He's like, "Hey, I have it." And he's like, "Ah." He's like, "Well, I had an idea, but we won't be able to do it now." He's like, "But just lay low." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I spent the entire first time being called up uh, behind the bleachers, like behind the curtain, like in a dark little, like by myself. I was shattered. I was like, this was my one shot. I fumbled the bag. I had, like, I was just heartbroken. I after the show, my wife at that time picks me up and she's like, "How'd it go?" And I just shared everything that I just told you. And she's like, "Well, what about tomorrow night? Because the SmackDown was going to be in Louisville."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I guess I'll show up. And if they tell me to go home, I mean, I guess I just know that it ain't for me. Like, it's just like they just didn't like me." So now, me freshly bald,
Mm-hmm.
um, Tuesday night, because SmackDown was taped on Tuesday at the time, we go, and this was the Tuesday in which CM Punk first started his what can't remember what was it called? Like it was like him, Serena.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Oh, what was that called? Is that where Serena got her head shaved?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they were wanting to pull somebody from the audience and shave their head, and that's what Ty was going to pitch to me, right? But I went ahead and I just shaved it right then. And so I get there, and I see Johnny Ace, and I was like, that's who I want to talk to, because he at that time he was head of developmental talent, like signing, right? So he was the
Hmm.
person that would be in charge of whether or not I got a job. And I was like, I'm gonna get in front of him. So I went up, met Vince, shook Vince's hand, introduced myself, went up to Johnny, shook Johnny's hand, and I was like, hey, I would like to speak with you. And he was like, yeah, sure, come on. So we go back into his office. We start talking about movies and storytelling, and he starts asking me like, what some of my favorite movies are, and we're just kind of having a conversation. And it comes up that he's like, well, have you done one of our tryouts? And I said that I had, and he was like, well, how'd you finish? And Ty walks in, Ty Bailey. Ty's like, well, he finished really well. He finished like top five. And Johnny Ace was just like, all right. He's like, well, he's like, I just have one question. Why are you bald? I said, Johnny, Johnny Ace, I can't, I don't, I've never believed in snitching or throwing anybody under the bus. Like, so I'm not going to do it. I was like, but I will say that like I did have a mohawk. Somebody told me that it wasn't a thing to have, so I just went ahead and shaved it. And Johnny Ace was just like, he's like, thank God. He's like, because some kid was here last night and he had a mohawk and I had to tell him to get out of here. And I was just like, yeah, that was me. You kicked me out. And he was just like, well, why'd you have a mohawk? And I said, well, again, like I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. And he was like, I am the person that can give you a job. He's like, if you want the job, you tell me who told you to get a mohawk. And I told him that Steve Kern had told me that I needed to do something to stand out. Johnny Ace is now laughing to the point where he has tears coming down his face. And he's just like, well, he's like, Steve, he ribbed you. Um, I did get a job, and so then I moved down to Tampa a few months after. But that is a very long story of
No, you're fine.
how I got into wrestling, how I ended like all of I don't know.
So how was that transition to when you got signed down to FCW? Was it that early period where they were still putting Dale Mabry together?
Yeah, so I got down there. It was right off of Dale Mabry. Um, I started the very same day as Richie Steamboat, which is
Hmm.
Ricky the Dragon Steamboat's son. Serona Snuka Tamina, that was her first day as well. The three of us came in together, and it was pretty much done on Dale Mabry.
Hmm.
Um, we did a show in Miami, and that was the first show that I did, and it was a battle royal. And I I didn't have a name, so they just went by Adam. And I was like, "Can I just use Asher because Asher is my middle name?" I was like, "That like I can go with that." And they're like, "No, Vince wants to own it, so we're just gonna go with your standard name right now, but we're gonna change that shortly."
Hmm.
So in Miami, to sell the shows, like it was, I think it was like a state fair, and there was like 8,000 people there. It was just huge, open arena. It was so hot, so, like just so humid. And we're sitting there, and Carlito was there, Big Show was there, and of course all the original NXT dudes that had yet to be called up because NXT wasn't a thing yet,
Hmm.
but they were all there, and it was my first match, and it was in a battle royal, and Big Show got real excited on hearing that this was like my first WWE event match battle royal, and he was just, and again, it's the ribbing
Hmm.
that makes this so fun. But it was he's like, oh kid, don't like. He's like, are you nervous? And I was like, yes. Like I am. Like I feel nauseous right now. And he's like, when we get in there, stick with me. You'll be okay. So I stick by his side, thinking this will be great. He's a pro. Nick told me to trust him. I trusted Nick. Nick led me through it. This is going to be great. I love Big Show. Great guy. He he gets me in the we get in the ring, and he like immediately grabs me, puts me in the buckle, and he does his like chop down, and he hit me like, oh my god, like every bit of air in my lungs just left. And I was like, I so immediately like I had learned that in those scenarios that you can like sell down and kind of like sell away. So I'm trying to like I immediately collapse because his hand is like a baseball mitt. So I sell down and I'm trying to sell away and he laughs. He's like, no, 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 no. Grabs me, puts me back in the corner, and I'm just like, somebody help me. Like so him and Michael Tarver from NXT, they come over and they start taking turns on like chopping me down. And like so after my first match, like I had like welts across my chest. Um, it's it was fun. It was all in good fun. No, nothing like that. So it's just that was my initial match, and the transition was pretty smooth. Dusty immediately put me on TV, which is weird because again, I only had like 6 months of experience. But it was a tag match with myself, Derek Bateman, Michael Hutter, and then the Rotundos. So that was like my first match, and like I really like that locker room when I went before I went. People talked about the WWE locker room, and it's like oh it's full of sharks, and they're it's so cutthroat. That was never my experience. Like my experience with the locker room was always super chill. Everybody was looking out for everybody else. It was like a family. Um, if there was a disagreement, it never got overly heated. People would voice their opinion, and then it would be done. Um, but everybody was super close. Everybody looked out for one another. Everybody protected one another, and there were times when after a show, if I think Richie got a concussion, like me and a couple of the other boys, like we went and we took him to the hospital, stayed overnight with him. So yeah, dude, I loved it. It was a great experience.
How was training there? You get there and you're working. What was the main differences from you were at OVW and then you went to FCW, the WWE way of things.
So the WWE way of things is that they have their own style of doing
Hmm.
things, and it's one of the like you learn to wrestle the WWE style. And so one of the things that I hate, I get it, but it's like I miss I'm old school, like I'm a
Hmm.
Jim Cornette type of guy, like the old territory type thing, because each territory kind of had their own style,
Hmm.
and so when you saw something like it was just different. And when you only have one major company, well, I guess there's TNA and AEW, but I mean everybody is still like it's all one typical style.
Hmm.
And I think that the art of wrestling loses a little something in that sense. The main difference for me was the size, strength, speed of the athletes that were performing, that were
Hmm.
in the ring. I went, dude. I'm 6'3" with wrestling boots, 6'4" because it has like a rubber part on it. I was at the time like 215. So in OVW, like I was one of the bigger guys.
Hmm.
I go to WWE and I'm one of the smallest guys, and it was weird. And so like it was definitely a change in the way in which I worked, the way in which I sold, the way in which I presented myself. It was just a complete 180. I've never been the super acrobatic doing suicide dives, swanton bombs off. That's never been my thing.
Hmm.
Again, I'm old school, and so Rip Rogers, there's an old name. Was one of my original coaches, right? So like Nick, Rip, Elijah Burke, Al Snow, all of those individuals had like huge influences over me and like my take on the business, the way in which you approach and train, the way you conduct yourself outside of the arena. And so for me, I always thought of something that Rip said. It was just like, oh, that looks dangerous. Somebody else can do it. And like I was like, dude, because I never wanted to hurt myself or to do something that would take me out of an opportunity.
Hmm.
So like I would, if I did do a suicide dive, it would be like at a paper. Like I picked my spots. I didn't just do it,
Hmm.
casual Wednesday. Like no, I'm gonna pick my spots and I'll do it then and make it mean something, make it worthwhile.
Hmm.
Um,
So as your time went on there, Did they have any plans for you? Were you pitching ideas on?
Dude, I pitched a ton of ideas. And the thing that was kind of hard about being in developmental was that you always, at least for me and like the people that I spoke to, like you wanted to pitch decent ideas, but
Mhm,
you never wanted to pitch your best ideas. You always wanted to have like when it came to like a finishing move or like your comeback sequence and everything like that. Like I would always have like things that I would do in the ring for developmental, but I always
mhm,
had in the back of my mind like if I get called up, that's when I'm going to do something different
mhm,
because I never wanted someone to see what I did or way like or a gimmick that I was looking at and have them take it and then do it on TV and then it's like well that idea is gone because
mhm.
it's out there now. So it was really it's like you were in this weird limbo state of where it's like I want to show them enough, but I don't want to show them everything until I get my opportunity if I get an opportunity. So it was like that weird way to go about it.
Did they ever have any ideas for you while you were in developmental?
They pitched an idea to me like with me and R Truth back when like NXT like it was like season 2 or something like that and they were like we could put you with R Truth and I was like that would be wild because he like from a comedic standpoint I feel like he and I could like play off each other and like that would be a whole thing. They ended up not going with it. But that was one of the few things where like I had pitched so many things. Um, and it was always we like it, keep refining it and, and,
Hmm.
and, and sort of work with it a little bit more. And then once it kind of gets to the place where we feel like, it's where it needs to be,
Hmm.
to where we present it, then we'll go with it. And I think that was just their nice way of saying like, that's not a good idea. Like, it's just, but Dusty Rhodes once told me he's just like, hey, you're throwing 100 miles an hour with everything that we give you. Like you're just, we can teach you how to, control it, like how to work on your accuracy, but we can't teach you how to throw 100 miles an hour. He's like,
Hmm.
so keep doing what you're doing. And I love Dusty, man. I loved, he was such a calming presence, and he was funny, and he could just ease like anytime people would tense up or get tight, like he could just lighten the mood.
Hmm.
Just the only way Dusty could, man. He was special, man.
Is there any moments that stand out more than others during your time there?
Oh my gosh, I got my best matches were with Gabby, with
Hmm.
formerly known as Tyler Rex. Like we had some amazing matches. Me and Big E had some amazing matches. Again, like I really loved the locker room and the people that I got to work with. Um, I think the thing that stood out to me the most, and I think it's almost like the end of a relationship. Like people always in the moment, like you all you can really think about is the way in which it ends,
Hmm.
right? And it's only through time, with time kind of passing that you can kind of look back and remember like the fun and fond, more fun, fonder times. But for me, the way that it all kind of ended is probably what stands out the most, which is unfortunate because there's so, like I said, there's so many good memories and fun times that I had when doing it.
Did they give you a reason for your release, or what led to
So,
that?
so when I got hired, I was one of the few people that had any type of advanced degree, right? So I had two undergraduate degrees and a master's degree. And so immediately, even in developmental, while doing that, they were like, "Hey, you can write. We want you to write for the magazine." So I was writing for WWE magazine. I was interviewing, fellow developmental talents and writing articles.
Yeah.
And and I was also friends with Alfred, which was like the main promoter of developmental. And he would have me going out and picking up and dropping off tickets. Like we would go poster telephone poles and flyers about upcoming local events. I would go pick up thousands of dollars from where the tickets were sold, and like they trusted me with this, which is wild. Um, but I would go and I would pick up the money and I would poster all this up and I would write articles for the magazine. And on top of that, when I was hired, Ty Bailey said he's like, "Hey, we're gonna set you up with, I think it was like $750 a week." And he's like, "Now, this is just state. We're starting this off. Like, we're going to assess and evaluate you at 6 months. If you're improving, we'll double that,
Hmm.
and we'll give you that raise." And so I was like, "Okay, cool." Like again, like I bet on myself. I knew that I could do it. I knew that I wanted to make this happen. I had ideas. I had the like again, like I feel like I had a good grasp of the business, and I could watch something and see it, and I could just pick it up. And
Hmm.
that's so we get 6 months in, and um, Dusty had put me in like a role for GM for developmental, and at that point it was NXT was going, season one, and we had Caval, we had um, at the time it was Johnny Prime, but they knew about Lucky Cannon,
Hmm.
uh, dude, uh, Michael McGillicuddy, which is Joe Henning, Kurt Henning's son. And so we have all these big names that have national promotion and doing all this. And Dusty put me as a GM like an 8 segment show. I was in 5 of the 8 segments, whether it was a promo, whether it was doing so. And at the end of it, like I had to be in a mixed tag match, or not mixed tag. I'm sorry. It was a 3v2 tag match, and it was like Eli Cottonwood, Michael McGillicuddy, and myself, which I was a face, and Dusty put me with the heels, and so like I had to tell this story of where it was just like I was just super excited to be there and let's kind of be a part of it, and I had to basically like quarterback that entire match because the guys I was like doing all these segments, and so when it came to the match, they're like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And they're like, why are you with the heels if you're a face? And I was like, okay, here's a story that we're gonna tell. And I just kind of laid it out to all the guys. They were like, sounds good. We went out, we did it. Within that match, the audience was chanting like Rudy. They were wanting me to get in, and I go in, slip on the banana peel, lose the match. Um, I go to tag, tag out, and the heels like abandon me to get so that they can keep their heat.
Hmm.
And so anyway, it worked out great. At that point, that was right around the 6 month mark, and I thought this would be a good moment to follow up with Ty and say, "Hey, remember when you had said that you were going to evaluate and see how I was improving?" Ty left me on red for about 2 months, didn't get back to me. At 8 months, he comes back to me and he's like, "Hey, we reviewed everything. You have made remarkable progress. Your physique is better. Your work is better. Your mic work is better across the board. You're doing everything that we could ask for you to do, but we're not going to give you that raise." I was like, really? Like I'm doing everything. I've met all like the goals that you set for me, and I'm writing articles, and I'm going and driving and doing all this stuff, and you still can't like you promised that that was going to be the case. And at that time, you don't that was where I learned you don't talk about money. You take what they give you unless
Hmm.
you are Randy Orton, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, CM, like you take what they give you.
Hmm.
Because if you don't take it, there's 1,000 other people that will, So I then got buried in a segment with Alex Riley on TV, which buried my character, and that was my punishment for speaking out. And at that point, that really rubbed me the wrong way. Um, my wife at that time became pregnant, and she had sort of laid out this ultimatum of like, you've been there for a year. It is you are either going to be with me and our child, or you're going to do this. And so like I had that ultimatum and seeing as they had just basically buried me and punished me for just asking what
Mm-hmm.
they had promised to follow through with what they promised, I was just like, why should I show loyalty to a company that won't show loyalty to me?
Mm-hmm.
And that was where I at that I don't have social media anymore, but at that time I had sent out like a Facebook post or something like that where it's just like, I'm leaving. They didn't let me go. Like, I requested my release. This is why. And I put it in there that it was just like it was over money, but it wasn't so much money. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I felt disrespected. I felt also that, like, with I didn't want to be an absentee father either. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to wake up my daughter for school, to make her breakfast, to drive her to school, to go to a little league game, to go to a school play. Like, I didn't want to miss those things, and so like that changed it for me. And I went in that next day, and I spoke to Dusty and I spoke to Dr. Tom, and they tried to talk me out of it, and I was just like, guys, like I
Mm-hmm.
can't, like, this is like I can't not be there for my kid, and they understood. I kept in close touch. I love Norman. Norman would
Mm-hmm.
reach out to me every 6 months, and he's like, "You want to come back?" And I, and I was like, he did that for like a year and a half. Like, he's like, if you want to come back, just say the word. And I was just like, I can't. Like, as much as I wanted to, as much as
Mm-hmm.
I loved it, and like I didn't want to be an absentee parent. Um, and seeing and hearing the things that I had seen and heard while I was there, it was not an environment that I would have wanted my daughter to be around.
Mm-hmm. I don't think you made the wrong choice. You know,
Thank
you
you.
you you made a choice a lot of other people wouldn't have made.
To me, man, it's about priorities, and
Mm-hmm.
family has always been something that's been very big for me. And so with my daughters, like I said, I love wrestling. I don't talk about it with them. Like, they've
Mm-hmm.
asked me before. I got two little girls now, and they'll ask me about it because somehow, like, their friends will bring it up, that I or their friends' parents or something, and they're like, "Dad, did you used to be like a celebrity?" And I was like, "No, like I used to do this, and I used to wrestle and do this stuff, but um, I would never encourage them to get into that business.
Mm-hmm.
If that's something that they discover on their own, then I'll support them. But it's never something that I'm going to like guide them to. Like, you should do this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not
How's
so.
life been after WWE? Did you wrestle anymore, like on the Indies, or?
Well, I did. That's I went back very briefly to OVW,
Mm-hmm.
in order to try and boost the locker room, to
Mm-hmm.
try and share with them the knowledge and the things that I had learned over that time that I was with WWE, to where it's like, hey, instead of doing it like this, what if you tried this and you did it? And I was just trying to like share that knowledge so that they could better themselves and that they could maybe have an opportunity. And that was where I really worked more closely with Al Snow. Jim Cornette was kind of in more of a management role when I got back.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very fortunate enough to kind of have some conversations with him. Um, so I was there briefly. The further my wife at that time was, along in her pregnancy, like when it got to where she was like 8 9 months, I was like, she was getting ready to pop. I was like, I'm out, guys. Like, I maybe once, maybe I can do some more indie stuff like after my daughter is born, but
Mm-hmm.
ended up not kind of following through with that. So I want to say my last match may have been with like Rudy Switchblade. I think that may have been my last one.
So how's
Which
life? Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, like, what were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna ask you how life was after wrestling.
It was good. It took me a while to sort of transition back out of that
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle and sort of living out of a suitcase, which was that's the grind,
Mm-hmm.
dude. It is a grind. When you're just traveling 5 days a week, and they're like, oh, you can go home for the weekend. You're doing a show Friday night, typically Saturday night, and so then you basically have Saturday into Sunday, but then by Sunday night you have to fly back out or drive back out to the
Mhm.
next venue. And so that's really like you get a day and a half, and that's about it. And it's a grind. You're washing your gear in hotel like room sinks, so you can. It's yeah, but the transition for me was difficult because I felt like I had so much in the tank left. Like I was just
Mhm.
kind of getting started. I was only like 28, 20, So I felt like I had really just kind of gotten a grasp of the business and really and at the time of when I left, I was around mid card or a little bit after mid card
Mhm.
developmental. I was just kind of getting looked at and being asked like to do dark matches for Raw. Like it was kind of starting to kind of come together,
Mhm.
and it was a decision again. Like leaving wasn't one that I took lightly, but it was definitely something that I don't regret. Again, I want to invest my time and my energy into my family, and that's
Mhm.
something that I would never regret, and I don't. But there were definitely times where, dude, I missed it. I missed being in the ring. I missed, telling those stories, and it took me a few years to really kind of regain my footing. Because, dude, I left my career. Like
Mhm.
I had a job as a director for a state hospital, left that. So it's like I had to start over with my career. I had to regain my footing, and it was a transition period. But I wouldn't change it.
No. What are you doing today?
So currently, I am a director again for a business here, provides treatment provider. It's KBC, so it's for mental health counseling. They have behavioral health services. They do a lot of different things. Currently, the program that I'm director of is for substance abuse, and so I'm working with families that struggle with that. So, I have an entire team that I get to work with. They're awesome. So they too have done the periodic Google search and picked my brain of like, you used to read, and I was like, yeah. They're like, well, why don't you talk about it? Because I didn't want you to know about it. That's why. Um, but no, it's great. My daughters are great, they're healthy. They are getting. What's funny is that they're getting into performance. My oldest has a school play coming up this weekend, so she's kind of getting into theatrics and performance as well, um, which is a proud moment, but also
Mhm.
like scary because I'm just like, oh god.
If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
To me, I think learning the fundamentals of the business is probably the most important thing, and for that, you want to pick the brains of those who have been there and done that.
Mhm.
And I think the best place to learn fundamentals is OVW. I
Mhm.
learned the fundamentals of what wrestling is, how to tell a story, how to take a bump. You to go there and to pick the brains of those who have been there and done it. And again, like OVW is probably one of the best territorial places to go that's
Mhm.
still around. They still have TV, they still have an arena, they have all of these opportunities for you to do house shows so you can get in front of people and you can practice and you can listen to the audience of what they respond to, what they don't respond to, how to call an audible. Like learning the fundamentals is huge,
Mhm.
and I can't think of a better place than OVW.
I couldn't agree more. I grew up in Southern Indiana, so I know all about OVW. Um, it's always been a part of why I love professional wrestling, and now it was always crazy because I always knew what OVW was and the talent that was
Yeah,
down there, but now the world recently got to see a resurgence of OVW, and now all this. If you go on YouTube and stuff, you can find like old matches and stuff
yeah,
outside
dude,
of
they're all
just the major four players they had. So I feel like everybody's relearning and discovering it for the first time.
same. It's funny. I actually went probably like 3 4 months ago. I went on their website just to kind of see what the roster looks like, and I was like, I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, okay,
Hmm.
we like it. They're still rocking. Good for
Hmm.
them. Um, so it's I love it. What's funny is that my mom and my dad have a retirement home in Florida, in a little retirement community, and they came home and they were came back to Kentucky, and were telling me, they're like, you will never guess who our neighbor down the street is. And I was like, who? They're like, Danny Davis is our. I was like, no kidding. So the next time they go down, I'm gonna go down and I'm gonna have a conversation with Danny and just relive old times and just talk
Hmm.
and hang out.
So I always I met Danny a couple times and I offered to help out right before he sold it.
Yeah,
And like I told him I'd help with the social media, and he's like, "Okay, give him the passwords." But if you f me, I was like, "Oh, calm down, I got it."
Danny
He
stands on
undid his
business,
he undid his
dude.
little glasses. He's like sat down. He's like, "Listen."
Dude, Danny stands on business. Him and like Mike Mondo, which former OVW talent, former WWE talent, like him and Mondo had an angle, and like Danny was like 60 at the
Hmm.
time and took a hell of a bump, and I was just like, God. So I, you know, Danny is all about the business. He's all about the bottom dollar.
Hmm.
But he went to bat for me when I was extra, talent in Louisville, and he was in Ty's ear. Like I saw that. I saw him talking to Johnny Ace before I got to. So like he helped set me up for success.
Hmm.
He gave me all the tools that I needed in order to progress and move forward, at that time. And that's all anybody could ask for. So I owe so much to, like, again, Danny, Nick, um, the Pope, Elijah, like all the, like Rip Rogers,
Hmm.
all of those guys, Jim Cornette, like they're so Al Snow, they're so influential in like everything that the way in which I approach the business, the way in which I think about it, the way in which I carried it and tried to do right by them. Like I
Hmm.
said, my Rudy Parker character was an homage to Eugene.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking some time out to talk about your career. Thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling. It's been an honor, and if there's ever anything I can ever do, please feel free to reach out.
Dude, same here. You got my number. Shoot me a text. Hit me up. We'll grab a drink some point. But thank you again for the opportunity. I appreciate you talking to me. And again, if there's anything I can do, man, just let me know.
I appreciate it.